the fundamental thing is when you're saying, I don't like this system, what you're really saying is, I do not believe some people have the right to vote in a system they pay for that elects the people who will be on the general election. That's what they're saying. They're saying, oh, we don't like this. Let's go do what they do in New York and New Jersey, where really the only people that matter are us consultants, us party leaders, and the partisans in our party, and everybody else can go sit at home and wait until we decide who's going to be your next representative.
These are party insiders, but I mean, they know the data. They know the data well, and they know how to weaponize that data as they see fit.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Independent Voter Podcast. We're here again with Cara, who's no longer East Coast Cara. She's back on the West Coast. Shawn is still in the middle of the country. We're going to have a pretty quick show today. First, I want to thank everybody who's been involved online and Independent Voter on social media. We've got a lot more people signing up on our YouTube page and coming to the website and, starting to use that new comment section. And so we're really happy with the growth of it. We got a lot of more exciting stuff coming up on IVP. But we got to talk about what's going on in California. It's kind of the national conversation right now, right? You got the Trump factions on the right of, there's got to be all this fraud and everything, because that's how did Pratt, just go down so far, so fast. And, Cara, you wrote a great article about why it's, the focus should not be on fraud. And I think you're working on a bigger piece, right, about what's really going on in California. But I think there's a really good story and something that people really aren't focusing on because, to be honest, what's going on is really more about that fact that California's legalized ballot harvesting. We've actually made it illegal to have voter ID. There's a lot of election rules that make it so easy to vote that really maybe the question is, have we made it too easy to vote? In that, it doesn't have to be fraud to be able to utilize some money and deploy people to collect ballots and to deliver ballots and in a totally legal way. That then you ask the question, is that how we should we be allowing that? Right. So, Cara, I don't know, give them a little bit of sense of what you talked about in your article. I know that article's getting passed around quite a bit. So you did a pretty good amount of research. So what's going on there?
Well, basically, the president started tweeting that there's no way that Spencer Pratt could have lost this election. There's a 3-way election for mayor in Los Angeles with Mayor Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, on the ballot, and then Spencer Pratt, who is a former reality television star, also on the ballot, and then a Democratic Socialist, Los Angeles Councilwoman Nithya Raman, who is also on the ballot. And so only 2 people get to make it into the top 2. And this was a pretty vigorous 3-way race. And on election night, Spencer Pratt and Karen Bass looked like they were going to take those top 2 spots. But lo and behold, 5 days of counting in Los Angeles with ballots coming in, every single day in waves. Raman was able to overtake Pratt and knock him out of second place and make it into the top 2 runoff herself. And so the Republicans, and Trump in particular, are sort of crying foul and saying, there must be something wrong here. There must be some fraud here. And really, there's no fraud at all. I think what happened... maybe there's no fraud at all, but there are tactics in Los Angeles that are perfectly legal, which I mentioned, 3 or 4 times throughout the article. I said, this is all perfectly legal. This is all perfectly legal. I went back and I looked at the laws, at the statute, to make sure that what was happening was illegal. So what was happening really is that Tom Steyer, who spent now $216 million, I think $195 million of it on ads alone, sort of took this very far right progressive lane for himself and put a whole bunch of money into get out the vote programs in high density neighborhoods in Los Angeles that happened to be also in Nithya Raman's, camp in her election, right? So Steyer was getting out the vote for himself And Raman was a beneficiary of that turnout program. And the turnout program it's not fraud. I said in the article, it's not cheating, but they've got something even better than cheating, which is this thing called ballot harvesting. And so I don't know if you want me to explain to everybody what that entails, but in California, everybody gets mailed a ballot, right? And so the get out the vote efforts in high density neighborhoods are people go to the doors and they knock on the door and they say that, they have a list of the people that they think are going to be on their candidate side. And they say, did you get your ballot? Have you voted yet? Would you like to vote now? Would you like to vote for Tom Steyer now? Even, right?
And I'll take your ballot in for you,
and I'll
right?
take and deliver your ballot in for you. So
Right.
This is what happened. And this is what explains why Raman was able to overtake Pratt in the waning, in the 5 days since the election occurred. These waves of these ballots that had been collected on behalf of Steyer, where Raman was the beneficiary. And it's interesting because Karen Bass was the beneficiary 4 years ago of this same sort of activity. And this activity has gone on since 2013, 2014, when the law changed.
Right.
So let's chew on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the issue. You have Trump out here going, oh, there's all this fraud and it's all this crazy, right? And then he kind of is his own worst enemy and actually having the discussion about it. Because to your point, it's legal, right? Like they've made it legal. So it's not, by definition, that's not fraud. But to also say there is no fraud, I don't think is also true. But because you're deploying so much money, which first of all, Tom Steyer had $216 million of reportable dollars. Turnout programs, by and large, are not even reportable expenditures. I mean, IVP does turnout programs all the time. There's no political reporting to do because we're like, for example, we're not supporting a candidate. We're just telling.
Right. We're not saying
voters,
like.
Right.
Exactly. We're not saying,
right. So
vote for this particular person, and probably neither were they, right? They were just saying, have you voted? And they might have had a list.
Well,
they're not supposed to, right? And that's the issue is that, they can instruct all they want from the top. So people are, like the Trump conversation and the right conversation is acting like there's this big seat at the table and they're orchestrating this from the top as here's what you got to do. And then you got to fill out the ballots. You got to do this, right? The reality is, this is an operation that has a home base. The DSA and the socialists have home base in
that's DSA stands for Democratic Socialists of America, and it's also the Working Families Party. So there's and also all the different Bernie groups. There's like Indivisible and Our Revolution, and there's all these. There's a huge group of progressive organizations that support sort of that far, far, far left contingent of the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
and that's what got deployed by Steyer.
You saw how much easier it is to mobilize when you have a organization like Our Revolution. They tout how they have 1 million followers, 1 million people on the ground that they can get out there and mobilize the vote. It's a lot easier to do that in a single city than statewide. So you're wondering why Steyer didn't benefit as much at a statewide level as he might have in Los Angeles, or at least aligned candidates did on Los Angeles. It's because it's just a lot easier to mobilize at a city at one location.
It's not just that, Shawn. It's larger than that. There's two factors. One, there's a home base in New York, LA, and Seattle. There's very strong, powerful, and these folks have been operating for several election cycles now, right?
They're super good at what they do.
Right. They know what they're doing. They're pushing them out.
Totally.
The thing about Steyer, right? Then what made LA fascinating is look at all the alliances that happened, right? You had Our Revolution with DSA, with Labor, SEIU, went and endorsed Steyer, right? So all these groups that already have their own ground operation, Steyer essentially bought them all. And they had a billionaire that went and now supercharged everything they've done because now they had unlimited money to do these programs that they've already perfected without Steyer's money, right? Mm-hmm. Now the question is, why wasn't Steyer as big of a beneficiary as Nithya? Well, because Raman is known in LA. She's clearly identified as the progressive pick and all that stuff, right? And so, of course, she becomes, and look, Bass flatlined, right? So in the past, Democrats, which, Bass isn't exactly moderate, but she's more of a traditional, part of the
Well,
Democratic
she's not a
Party.
socialist, right?
Right.
She's not a socialist.
She's not, right?
Right.
She was what they had to vote for. But now this is evidence that this isn't really Democratic Party operations. These are far left operations that are now like showing that they're out of sync with the Democratic Party themselves, right? So it'll be interesting to what happens here. But to the point, why didn't Steyer benefit as much? Because they can't go and say, vote for this person, right?
Of
In
course
LA,
not.
they don't like Bass. They know Raman's this way. The fact is, Becerra being on the ballot is what killed Steyer, because a lot of the folks, they kind of like Steyer. And then there's a large Latino population that may have voted for the progressive in LA, but they liked the fact that Becerra's on the ballot. So, there's a lot of just confluence of factors. And then to Shawn's point is, once you get outside of LA and you don't have that power base of the progressives, right, that it's a lot easier to turn them out knowing they're going to vote for a Democrat. But then it's harder to go and say, look, vote for this particular Democrat, right? And to the extent that there's fraud of like people actually filling out ballots or having paying homeless people to do it, which you'll see stuff on Twitter and everything, right?
So much of that right now, right? They're saying that there was all this
some of that
homeless
could
voting.
be true, but that's when you're spending that kind of billions and you're pulling out hundreds of thousands of ballots, is like, yes, there are some operatives at a lower level, like just like you may have an employee in a McDonald's somewhere that's stealing from the cash register, right? But that doesn't mean McDonald's is on a large scale, like stealing from, you know what I mean? It's the point being that, yes, there's stuff.
There's always going to be a few bad
but it's
eggs,
not a
right?
coordinated fraud that the Justice Department's going to be able to go and prove a large malicious conspiracy, right?
But also, you guys, it's that how many Republicans are there actually in Los Angeles? I'm super sorry. Like, no matter how telegenic and wonderful Spencer Pratt is, it's still it's like 14%, right? It's nothing.
Well,
There's no Republicans there, and nobody was harvesting ballots for Spencer Pratt.
Well, Pratt said
right?
he had a big ballot harvesting operation, but it doesn't matter how big it is when you're contingent. He's 14%, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But-
Democrats outnumber Republicans 3-1 in the city. So
I don't care how good your ballot harvesting operation. When you have the combination of our revolution, the DSA, SEIU, these are now institutional players that know how to ballot harvest. It's like they've been preparing. It's like, okay, I'm going to go play in the World Series. This is the first time I've ever played a baseball game, right? You got the best teams literally partnered with each other. And then on top of that, a billionaire said, okay, now that you're all teammates, here's unlimited funds, which, Cara, are not included in your $216 million figure because they're not reportable, right?
They go through they're nonprofits. So they go through there's a huge, collection of these nonprofits. And as long as they're just saying, have you voted? Would you like to vote? And can I take your vote? Can I take your ballot to the government for you? That's totally legit.
Yeah.
And you don't have to report it. It's true. You don't have to report. I mean, you have to report it like on your 990 and that sort of thing. But But yeah, it's not sort of through the normal, what's it called in California, the Fair Political Practices Commission.
And we've seen it reported that increasingly Democratic aligned organizations or organizations on the left are increasingly relying on these nonprofit groups to kind of funnel money in when they spin elections. This came out during the Virginia vote on redistricting, right? You had 85 to 90% of the spending, and that was from nonprofit groups. And it was like $100 million. So
Virginia's always been this place. I remember the first time I ever learned about the Virginia campaign finance laws. It was like way back in 1994 when I was working for Chuck Robb and sort of looking at Oliver North's finances and how he was doing this in this election. And I realized, like, wow, Virginia is the Wild West. Like you think that some of these places have no rules. Well, Virginia, they really have no rules.
But
when it comes to this.
To get back to LA, I think though, yes, there was no way Pratt, even if he managed to get into the runoff, was going to win a general election against Karen Bass.
Which is why Karen Bass was like praying that she would have.
Right. That's why Bass was hoping for that scenario. So there wouldn't have to be a competitive general election, but at least in a nonpartisan primary model, the quarter of the electorate that did vote for Pratt, who used him as a vessel for their anger and frustration, were able to express that frustration. Right. And that's on the record.
Right. And what's revolutionary, though, is not that, I mean, on a municipal level, you know, LA, just like San Diego and pretty much all of California, has always had nonpartisan elections, unlike the outliers like New York that have closed municipal elections. But because California also added nonpartisan elections at the top of the ticket for statewide races, right, we're going to see NPP turnout probably past 25%, right?
Really?
Which,
wow.
Oh, it's going to pass 25% this year, the larger rate than we've ever seen in California, right? You know, IVP, I think, could take some credit for that simply because I think we're the first organization that literally, you know, you go, okay, well, what did you spend money on? We spent money sending a simple message to NPP voters. You can vote for any candidate from any party, right, in the primary. Because most
here's
people
when it is.
Know, right? It's been
2nd,
12 years,
right?
but most people don't know that. And we don't understand. Why don't they know it? Because Democratic and Republican operatives don't spend any money communicating to NPP voters. So we did a big program just letting them know. And you know what? When you compound that, I can vote for anybody at the top of the ticket. And, there's also a race here in LA, right? You see the participation. And guess what? In a place like LA, NPP voters are a lot more important than Republican voters because even if they're voting at a lower percentage in LA, NPP far outnumbers Republican voters. So I got to go look at the aggregate statistics, but I bet you there was more NPP voters that came out than Republicans.
And the party operatives continue to mislead people on the fundamental purpose of the nonpartisan primary model. I was reading a article in Governing, or whatever that magazine is called. I think it's called
Governing.
Yeah, I read that. It was people who said that the point of Top 2 was to produce more moderate candidates, and it was failing. And that's not the point of Top 2. The point of Top 2 is to give every voter, regardless of party, including independent voters, an equal say in the process. Allow them to vote for whoever they want. And what we found in California is that sometimes that will be a more moderate voice. That will be the Javier Becerras, right, at the statewide level. But at a local level, they're going to want a more firebrand, possibly, more ideological person. And that's their choice, either way.
That's right. Let's talk about the governor's race. Let's talk about the governor's race in California, and then let's talk about what happened in Maine.
Well, I was going to say we got a lot of focus on California, so we do a few minutes on the governors, and I want to move to Maine though, where Cara, you are basically responsible for the new dynamics of Maine. But
I don't know about that. But first, we know for sure that the top 2 in the California governor's race as of yesterday is going to be Javier Becerra and Steve Hilton, a Republican. So we're going to have one Democrat and one Republican. This is the thing that, for whatever reason, certain people didn't think was going to happen. They either wanted it to be 2 Republicans so that they could try to get rid of top 2, or they wanted it to be 2 Democrats so that they could get rid of top 2. And now that it's a Republican and a Democrat, they probably still want to get rid of top 2 because it didn't allow a Green or
because it almost happened, right? So
because they think it almost happened. First, they said it almost happened that it was going to be 2 Republicans. Well, we know that is just a false flag. Like, that could never happen in a state where there's 45% Democrats. You're not going to have 2 Republicans. And those polls that they were citing had huge undecideds, 25%, 30% undecided. So this was just never going to happen. And somehow, maybe it's like the sexiness of the story. Oh my God, it's going to be 2 Republicans in California. Like, everybody sort of like fed on that in terms of the media. Like, oh my God. Yeah, I had friends calling me saying, are there going to be 2 Republicans? And people believed it.
Yeah.
Well,
wow. I mean, look, and just right after when the initial election drops, and I don't want to personalize this and tag folks, but,
don't personalize it then.
One of the people that's, always there, always quoted, and really doesn't like top two, goes and points to the Kylie race, says, look, here's another race where Democrats won't have a voice. Well,
So
Richard
this is a
Pan was what,
congressional
like,
race, right?
Yeah.
Let's just tell everybody
yeah,
this is a
Richard
congressional
Pan's
race in
like 3
California.
votes behind, and everybody who knows anything in California knows he's going to catch up easily, if not end up in first place. So there will be a Democrat on the ballot. Yet takes this narrow opportunity to, I think, disingenuously gin up whatever kind of negativity that they can towards, see why this isn't good, right? And what they never say is about the fundamental thing is when you're saying, I don't like this system, what you're really saying is, I do not believe some people have the right to vote in a system they pay for that elects the people who will be on the general election. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if they believe that it was because we artificially narrow the candidate field to 2 and we should have more choices and stuff, that's a legitimate perspective, okay?
Totally.
But the folks aren't saying, oh, we don't like this, therefore let's go introduce something that gives more choice. They're saying, oh, we don't like this, let's go do what they do in New York and New Jersey, where really the only people that matter are us consultants, us party leaders, and the partisans in our party, and everybody else can go sit at home and wait until we decide who's going to be your next representative.
Yeah, I mean, and these are party insiders, but they're also, I mean, they know the data. They know the data well, and they know how to weaponize that data as they see fit. So when they come out on X and they say, oh, well, we think the media spent way too much time on the governor's race when you were spending all your time talking about the governor's race, they should have been focused on Congressional District 6, where Pan was in. And the irony is that the same people who were going after the MAGA people for weaponizing the slow count, trying to say fraud, were also weaponizing it themselves by suggesting that the Democrat wasn't going to get in the top 2 spots when we know the data shows that all the late count mostly favors Democrats. It was only a few points.
It's such a disingenuous. It was such a disingenuous slight. My thing is, why doesn't anybody call them out? Not only do they not get called out, the press calls
keep getting
them,
quoted, right?
Press
they keep
calls
getting
them
called.
and then suggests that they're these bipartisan, nonpartisan data experts. Like, no, they're not. They're political operatives.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying to engineer a result on behalf of
and
their
then the
candidates
news goes,
for their
why
party,
don't people
right?
trust us? Why don't people trust the news that we're providing? Well, because like I'm telling you right now, like you live in this world, your job is to be a journalist, not to be a fish, right? And these people keep going out and putting these fishing lines into the water, and you act like a fish and you just take the bait every single time, get the hook in your mouth, and then you write what these fishermen, political consultants, want you to write. That's not what journalists are supposed to do. Start doing your job. Sorry, I got a little bit of tirade there, guys.
You know, we wouldn't be the Independent Voter podcast without a tirade from Chad once in a while. But I feel your frustration. I feel your frustration because you're going to try to go back now these people to a closed system that's going to deny 7 million Californians the right to participate in their democracy in favor of a system where the Democratic insiders basically can control everything. And it's so funny because Karen Bass, if we want to just go back, take it full circle, she wanted Spencer Pratt as her opponent, just like Javier Becerra wanted Steve Hilton as his opponent and not Tom Steyer. And so, right, they don't want to run against Democrat on Democrat in these races because then all of the battles within the Democratic Party and all the ideological, nuances of what it all comes out into the open, right? So then now it's really in Los Angeles, it's going to be a battle over whether or not socialism is what the voters of Los Angeles want. Do they want a socialist candidate? Now they're going to have that choice. They're going to have the choice between a socialist Democrat and sort of a regular liberal, left of center Democrat. And this is what the parties, they don't like this. They don't want their battles to be out in the open for everyone to see and choose from. They'd rather have figured it out ahead of time, come up with their candidate, and then just go one-on-one against a Republican and run their same Republicans bad, Democrats good, Democrats bad, Republicans good. This is what they know how to do. This is their bread and butter. This is what allows them to win, right? Javier Becerra is going to become the next governor of California. I don't care what Steve Hilton says, does, spends. It's never going to happen.
Which would have been harder to say if Steyer would have gotten through. You couldn't have
if it
said
was Steyer and Becerra. No, I think it's anybody's guess at that point, which is what that's what he was trying to break into, right?
Of course.
And that's why he took that far, far, far left lane, because it was open for the taking.
So there's the frustrations the powers that be have over California system. Now, what's going on over there in Maine, Cara? Because when I said Maine, Cara was responsible. Cara is the one that got the ranked choice voting effort in Maine started when most people didn't know what ranked choice voting was, and literally did the hard work of hitting the pavement. She won't say this, so I'm saying it, because I saw it, of doing the hard work of going to breweries and showing people how to rank their beers and do that, and built up what then years later became the first state to introduce ranked choice voting. So there's no one better to comment on. Everybody, the national narrative is all about Graham Plattner and whether it's okay to, as long as the guy has a Nazi tattoo, as long as he's our Nazi, is it okay to vote for him, right? So,
and more than 100,000 Mainers did vote for him yesterday. And so Maine's not perfect, right, guys? So Maine does have ranked choice voting, but we also have, they're called semi-open primaries. So in Maine, if you're a no party preference voter, or we call them unenrolled voters in Maine, you are allowed to go to the voting booth yesterday and say, Miss Clerk, I would like a Democratic ballot, or I would like a Republican ballot. So you are allowed to be an NPP voter, but they are still pretty much closed primaries, right? It's not like California where you have Susan Collins and Graham Plattner and, these other candidates all on a ballot together, which is really how it should be. And so, but anyway, we do have ranked choice voting in Maine. And so yesterday, Graham Plattner won the Democratic primary. It looks like he got over 70% of the vote. So he's definitely going to be the nominee. And, I wrote a story this week in IVN about how the story about Graham Plattner and his sexting and his, past, there's been a bunch of terrible stories that have come out about how he was violent against some of his ex-girlfriends, or at least one of his ex-girlfriends, that's really not the political story that Maine sort of deserves to be having told about its political culture. Because in the governor's race, on the Democratic side and on the Republican side, you have ranked choice voting. And in the governor's race, you had at least three candidates, Hannah Pingree and Troy Jackson and Shenna Bellows, all campaigning, saying, please pick me first, but if I'm not your first choice, here are two other people that I've worked with, that I know, that I respect, where my values are similar. And these are the people that I would hope that you would rank. If you don't rank me first, please rank them. And this is like a completely different kind of campaigning. They weren't attacking each other. They weren't unloading opposition research, based on, text messages to each other. They appeared at press conferences. They had healthy debates. And now it really looks like it's almost like a four-way tie in Maine. And it's all going to go to ranked choice voting, and we have no idea what's going to happen. The voters, when I looked at the results this morning, I thought, oh my God, this is so cool, because when you have 24% for one, 25% for the other, 23% for one, and then 21% for the other, right? You see that people really went to the ballot and they really did choose who they wanted to vote for as their first choice, right? Mm-hmm. They really genuinely chose who they wanted to be first. Who is my first choice? Is it Hannah? Is it Shenna? Is it Troy? In Maine, it's like, we know these people. We call them by their first names. And people basically went in and they got to vote their hope. They didn't have to vote strategically for their first choice, right? They just got to say, like, this is my guy, or this is my person, without fear of electing somebody that they didn't necessarily like. So I don't know. I did for sure when I voted in California this year and not in Maine. I feel so sad that I didn't get to vote for my friend Troy Jackson, who I love. And the reason why I love Troy Jackson, just shout out to Troy and to Shenna and to Hannah. But Troy Jackson is the reason that we have ranked choice voting for president in Maine. It's the first state in the nation to have ranked choice voting for president in the primaries and in the general election. And it's because of the former Senate President Troy Jackson, who went up against, he's a Democrat, he went up against the strongest and most powerful Democrat in the state, who was Janet Mills at the time. And he made that bill, he pushed that bill through against her wishes because he knew that it was the will of the people of Maine. And so shout out to Troy. He ran under ranked choice voting. It was a good, clean, lovely governor's race. As far as I can see, there was a couple attacks at the end from Nirav Shah, but we'll see how it all turns out. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens when they count the ballots. Now, also, I want to say it does take longer, right? People are kvetching about how long this ballot counting is taking in California. Like, what has it been, a week since the election? We know who all the candidates are in California right now, and the ballots are still being counted. And yes, it would be great if ballots could be counted faster. And I think there's even a New York Times editorial this morning saying this has to change. We have to get the result quicker. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with that because I kind of feel like, people can wait. It's okay to wait a few days to make sure that every vote is counted and every vote is counted properly.
Well, I think people would be surprised by how many states actually do take quite a bit of time to certify their election results. Like they think it all gets decided on election night, but what you see on election night are unofficial results. When I wrote the story about why it takes California so long to count the ballots, I noted in there that there are states with longer windows to certify the election. Nebraska, I think, is 8 weeks to certify the results, right? That doesn't mean it's always going to take that long, right, to count them out and certify it, but it's for some states, it does take, you got to make sure you're counting all the ballots. If there's an opportunity to cure, say, mail-in ballots, say a voter made a mistake, maybe the signatures didn't match, you want to give them the opportunity to correct that, because that's a kind of a silly reason for your vote not to count. Oh, my signature wasn't perfect this time around, so it's not going to count. So, it's just the thing that people need to keep in mind is that it does take time to certify election results, just anywhere you go.
And in Maine, you're going to bring all the ballots to a central location. And then once you get them all at the central location, they run the tabulation, and the ranked choice tabulation takes 10 seconds. This is not fast. Once you have all the data together, they can run it and you'll know who the winner is. And you'll also have all the voter data, all the cast vote records will all be available for all the public
really
to see.
It's really not a ranked choice problem. It's a collection problem.
Yeah, it's a collection problem.
When you have all the islands and plantations and everything, you got to get everybody to the same place. And so any place that you're going to do ranked choice voting, like Alaska, it's just going to take a little bit of time to get the result. But it's never been, like Shawn says, the certification deadlines for secretaries of state to certify elections are usually a month after the election to make sure that every single vote got counted. Now, I don't love to know what you guys think about. There's this New York Times editorial, like I said this morning, talking about how California needs to get its shit together and count the votes faster. And one of the things that they're saying that they should do is, instead of allowing ballots to be counted that were postmarked on election day, just say the ballots have to actually be in by election day or no go. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with that at all. And I even mentioned in that article, I think it's worth the conversation, it's worth the debate, because in California, they can accept ballots up to a week after the primary as long as it was postmarked by election day. And we can have that debate about whether or not that's too long of a window, because a week is quite a bit of time. So, and then, I know we talked about on the podcast before, everyone gets a ballot when they send them out. And if you don't get a ballot within a week or so of the date that they send them out, you can track it to see if it's coming. Sure. You can contact your county elections official and have them send you a replacement if you need to. So, but there's really California has made it so easy that there's kind of no excuse to get your ballot in by election day, at least in my opinion.
The other thing is about the postmarking, right? That the Trump administration, now the U.S. Postal Service, doesn't guarantee that if you drop your thing off on a certain date that it's going to have a certain postmark. That's right, really interesting too.
Unless you pay the USPS.
Yep. The flip side of that, my opinion is our election. They need to be beyond suspicion. You allow ballots 9 days before they can receive. It doesn't matter whether it is or it isn't. It's got to be above suspicion. And the fact that You could have ballots out there, and whether they got postmarked or somebody postmarked it or backdated it or anything. I mean, California lets you write in the dates on some of this stuff too on your own ballot. It's like, okay, well, let's assume there's not large scale fraud. The fact is, you've opened this massive opportunity to invite suspicion, invite conspiracy, invite all that stuff. And there's no reason we can't put a process together that doesn't allow for all that stuff. That's basically unprovable suspicion, which just results in distrust, argumentation, and all that kind of stuff. But
And
I
people
also
saying
see,
basically we shouldn't do ranked choice voting, right? We shouldn't do ranked choice voting because it takes too long, you know?
that's a
Or
different, I mean, that's a different issue of right? You're
well, they're,
saying
they're
it's not
basically
about
all saying
taking
that it
too
takes too
long
long to get
about,
a result, right? So if it takes too long to get a result, then there's room for hanky panky, right? So
no, that's a
Well,
different issue than
yeah,
what Shawn was saying. We're talking about the receipt of the ballots, of whether, okay, do they need to be received and in hand on election
on
day?
election
right,
day,
Where
yeah,
right.
yeah,
California, they can receive it 9 days after the election, right? And
Mm,
so there's this
right. As
9-day
long as it's
period.
postmarked.
You don't even know how many ballots are out there. And then my
Nope.
point about suspicion is, of course, you're going to have people. Anybody who loses is going to naturally go, well, I don't know. Maybe there was a box of ballots that came out, or maybe there was this or there was that. Why invite that 9-day period of, we
yeah.
don't know what's out there. We don't know where it is. I don't know. Maybe some, so it's going to naturally invite suspicion. That's my point,
Yeah.
is that the
Yeah. And
standard.
then the natural inviting of suspicion, particularly like in this environment, right, where suspicion gets picked up by certain politicians and then used for their, for their own gain to cast doubt on our system, right? So there's all these
Correct.
politicians who it's their
And
strategy to cast
Well,
doubt so that
yeah.
they can cast doubt on the results when they don't win or when their people don't win.
I
This is
mean, you
not
you
good.
certainly have people on the MAGA side in particular who say that election results should be in by election day. We should know by election night who won these elections. A slow count invites fraud. I'd argue that a quick count just as much invites fraud as well as human error. So if you're just rushing the count, not making sure every eligible vote is counted and processed, and if there needs to be, say, ballot curing or corrections, that the voters have an opportunity to do that, I would say that a quick count is not something we should just on the surface say is a solution either.
Well, we're past the 30-minute mark here, folks. So I know we got a lot coming up. You got a quick hit, Shawn, since I think Cara and I stole most of the show. You got any quick
No, you're
hits?
good. So in Oklahoma, the fight for open primaries may not be over just yet. A group of
That's cool.
4
What
Oklahoma
happened?
voters, so a group of 4 Oklahoma voters are challenging the Secretary of State's signature count for State Question 836, which proposes a nonpartisan primary system very similar to California. In Washington, all voters, all candidates on the same ballot. Everyone gets to choose anyone they want. You're not locked out based on your party affiliation or lack thereof, which of course Oklahoma right now, they do have a semi-closed system where parties could decide who gets to participate. And this year, all the parties decide to lock out independents. So independents don't get a vote in the primaries this year. The proposal would allow the process to be open to everyone, all voters, all candidates. And so in
Does it move
January,
2 forward or 4 forward, or did they figure
2
that part
forward,
out?
and I know in
Okay.
California, reformers are now trying to expand that to 4 or 5. But sometimes it's just baby steps, right? You want to get there, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. And to get
yeah,
rid of the first past the post voting
right.
system in the first place, right? That's the first goal.
And so a challenge has been filed with the with the state Supreme Court, because back in January, the Secretary of State had determined that 58,000 of the signatures that were collected of the over 209,000 were disqualified because of this new law that required 4 out of 5 data points in the voter file to be verified, which I think the law
Wow.
itself, not necessarily a problem, but it's understandable that in the first election that it is implemented in, that there may be some error. And the point
That's
that the plaintiff,
58,000 people they're saying
50,
did not do it right.
and the
That's
plaintiffs
a lot.
were said explicitly in bold in their challenge, 58,000 Oklahomans didn't lie. All right. So like
Right.
they're eligible voters. So what they've asked the court to do is either rule that the signatures for the initiative are sufficient, which would suggest all of them, which the court probably won't do, or have the Secretary of State account for individual signatures that were disqualified. And if the Secretary of State can't produce a reason why, then those signatures should be considered sufficient. Because one of the big problems is the Secretary of State produced this aggregate report that shows how many were disqualified, but not an individual count for why. And that's one thing that these plaintiffs want, is a reason why they were disqualified.
Yeah, in Maine, that's definitely, it can be a signature by signature by signature fight. At one point in 2020, I believe it was, the Republicans were trying to collect signatures to get rid of RCV for president. So we literally had to go signature by signature, looking at their signatures, looking at our signatures, and having it all get battled out in court about which signatures were good, which signatures weren't. And it's a mess. It's a mess. It's, part of the reason why it sure would be great to just use DocuSign for signature gathering, electronic signature gathering. You can totally, it's all so possible to verify that you are who you say that you are. And we did it in Massachusetts one time during COVID, and it totally worked. So anyway,
that's a whole new show.
Other episode.
We covered a lot of ground today. We got a lot going on in IVN. We also got Matt Shinner's put out a lot of good articles on all the folks running outside the two-party system this election cycle. There's a lot more coming. And we've got a lot more that we'll be talking about every week on IVN. So if you haven't already, subscribe to Independent Voter Podcast on Spotify, Apple Music. There's a lot more you subscribing on YouTube. So thank you. Again, come back to IVN.us. And, whenever you got some extra money in your pocket and you want to go to independentvoterproject.org and give us a little contribution, we'll take that too. But thanks again,
and
Cara.
Thanks for all the
Shawn.
Comments too. All the comments on our stories now. So we didn't used to have the ability for people to say what they think about what we've written.
I just want to say my inbox is flooded with new comment.
Oh
so
my
it's
God.
Great. Yeah.
I love that. Love that. Good. Except for it's kind of crazy how my inbox looks right now. I need to figure out some sort of way to at least put them in one category so it's out of control. But thank you for everybody who's commenting and being part of our little ecosystem here. We love you.
All right. We'll see you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Shawn. Thanks, Cara.
Great to see you guys.
Até depois from Brazil.
Come home from Brazil safe and sound soon. We miss you.
Ciao. This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.